Well, okay. Speaking of his vision of sort of a world dominated by money and people in democracy is essentially being robots. The next thing I want to ask you about is not a person, but a motif that comes up again and again in your films, and I'm talking about images of people dancing. And I remember all the way back in The Power of Nightmares, there's a scene where you talk about a part in Saeed Kateb's memoirs, where he writes about a revelation that he had attending a college dance in Colorado in the 1950s. And it was this vivid moment of horror for him about what the West truly represented. And like that has always kind of stuck with me in my head whenever dancing shows up in your movies, because it's always vaguely disquieting. There are people in nightclubs, on stage, with a partner, either in free form or these kind of mass choreographed movements. For you, do you find the image of people dancing, does this sort of reflect the ideas you're kind of communicating about this individualism and how people see themselves and how they actually behave? Because, dance is an expression of the self, the body, movement, freedom. But in another sense, it's also totally programmed and not of ourselves, but in fact, sort of coming from somewhere else, something controlling us almost.
Yeah, that's right. That's why I do it.
Okay, got it. All right. So wish.
I would never normally talk about it like that, but privately, that's exactly why I do put them in, because I think, again, it's a very ambiguous thing to look at. I mean, the underlying thing in the age of individualism, the age of the self that we've all lived through, is whilst on the one hand, we are very free and we're very conscious that we are free and that we can express ourselves, there is also a deep sense of self-consciousness in our time, which I think previous ages didn't really have. I mean, I know they were self-conscious in other ways, but there is a sense that you get throughout all this, and I've never managed to get this into a film because I don't know how to express it, is that people have a sense they're being watched. And you get this online all the time, that people behave as though they are being watched, even if they're not. Dancing is this really strange moment because on the one hand, it's that moment when many people give up that sense of self-consciousness and really let themselves be what they are. But at the same time, you're right. They're dancing within quite a pre-programmed, every DJ knows the range of beats per minute that you can work with. It changes through the decades. And rather like the characters in the films, dancing is exactly the same ambiguous thing. It's, on the one hand, it's the moment when you are looking at people truly being themselves, and it's wonderful and it's glorious. There's right at the bit, one of the characters at the end called Julia. I have her dancing in a club, and it's just beautiful. It's just lovely. You're watching someone, you want to cry. Whereas there are other moments when there are people just dancing, and you feel a bit like Limonov said, they think they're free, but they're like robots in a system. And it's that, again, that paradox of our time is that we feel completely free, but what we don't see are the tendrils of the systems of power that sort of hold us together. There's a Chinese science fiction writer who I really like called Liu Cixin, who said once, what we don't realize is that we're always dancing in chains. And that's, I get that, is that we're dancing, but there are chains that are holding us, sometimes gently and sometimes beautifully. But that's how power works in these days. There are these invisible chains around us. And sometimes dancing shows that, and sometimes it shows people freeing themselves from those chains.